So I'm Ethan Plotkin. I'm with GDCA Inc. We're a small California company that manufactures discontinued embedded computing products. So I figured today I'll start out this talk by pontificating a little bit about the theme of our conference today. The future is now. So I thought a little bit about this, and I thought, what does that really mean? And what I thought about was if I could make a change now that would immediately infect my future, that's how I saw the future is now theme. And I thought, how cool would that be? If I could have hit the gym this morning and then had immediate results after I worked out, then I would have done it. And I'd probably be about maybe 5 or 10 pounds lighter right now. And so I figured this would be the way I would think through the talk I was going to be giving today. And I've always been kind of a maven or a guy who likes to see subtle changes that have quick and big impacts. And history is full of those types of impacts, things that you can do that can have radical changes. And today I'm here to talk about some subtle changes in the way that we think and act that could transform our businesses pretty quickly. History is full of these types of changes. For example, hand washing and hygiene really transformed surgical survival rates in the late 19th century. And before that, infection was pretty much a foregone conclusion, even with compound fractures. And funnily enough, that idea around hand washing and sanitation had been around since the 1840s. So it took about 35 years to really take off. I think there's other subtle changes in the way that we understand that have really transformed things, like bots dots. I think depending on where you're from, you might call them buttons or they might be called turtles. Well, these are basically those little dots that are in the median of the road, and they really radically transformed the occurrence of fatality from head-on collisions. And those were introduced in the mid-60s. And again, that was an idea that had been around since the 1930s. And history is full of these types of ideas, and they're fun to ponder. Stirrups on horses always was something that was interesting to me, even from middle school. Until then, you couldn't ride a horse without hands, which is really handy to do if you want to shoot a bow and arrow. And then, of course, that whole idea around friction and heat solved that whole fire-on-demand problem. And all of this stuff really talks to the maven within me that is always looking for simpler solutions to long-standing problems. When I started my career in IT project management in pre-dot-com San Francisco, hashtag feeling old, though I imagine I won't get much sympathy from some people in this room. It was a revelation to me when I learned that a project team, the structure of a project team, could actually change shape over the phases of a project. I was coming from college where the projects were very small and the teams were small, and generally the roles were fixed from the beginning to the end. And the idea that an org chart could actually change across different phases of a project totally blew me away. And I know it seems really obvious right now, but people who need to know this stuff have to learn it at some point, and that's when I learned it. And I think this is the idea that we should consider things that we think should at some point be flexible and rigid could in fact be very dynamic and malleable to service changing needs over time. Is that we can change the way we treat products over time to evolve with the changing needs of the products. And this brings me to my big idea, right? Which is that board original equipment manufacturers and system original equipment manufacturers can radically increase the control they have over their business if they change the way they deal with old product designs, especially those with low and sporadic demand. Years ago when I first got into this business, I was over in Europe and I was meeting with a struggling German board OEM. I was meeting with their VP of product marketing and their director of sustainment engineering. And they had been growing by acquisition for many years. And what they found was that after 8 years into this strategy, the majority of their products were old. And the majority of their revenue was coming from products that were more than 6 years old. And so what they found was they needed to, and they were a couple of years behind even to bridge the gap and replace the old products with new products. And that was about 3 years away from even being able to replace their old product designs with new products. And they were hoping to get even 50% of what they were currently at. And so to bridge the gap and sustain their organization, what they ended up doing was they were caught in a cycle of end-of-lifing old designs, getting a big last-time buy bump, followed by 3 to 5 years of ad hoc product requests for those very same old designs for the customers who didn't buy enough. And as a result, it was a real problem for them. It was this 3 to 5 year period that was really killing them. And they were struggling with that. And I actually had a list of customers who had contacted me looking for support on those old designs. And so and the problem that they were encountering was obsolescence, right? So the operations teams was constantly getting pulled into obsolescence issues, which was then pulling in their best engineers and their best technicians on their old designs to sustain them. And what was more happening was that the engineering teams were actually not able to get new products out the door fast enough, time's okay, to backfill the gap in the old designs, right? They needed to get the new designs out. And that's the thing about old designs. If you stick at them long enough, then they will eventually take as much time to sustain, engineering time to sustain, as they did cumulatively to introduce them in the first place. And the ROI is like that, is a modicum, right? So it's not a great. And it's really like taking time to like continue putting air in a leaky tire. And of course, these customer delivery issues, right? They pile up and they pull everybody else in the whole organization into all these problems. So it's sales teams and product marketing teams who are talking customers off the edge and holding customers' hands. And so that's just yet more time pumping in the leaky tire. Okay. So I had a lot of sympathy for these guys. I mean, the director of sustainment, he told me, hey, this is like spinning plates. And so I told him, look, I get it. I see this all the time, right? You know, like heroic and doomed efforts by the likes of you, teams that are responsible for sustaining old products, but they don't have the leadership support and they don't have the institutional support that they need to succeed. And he told me something that really surprised me. He said, Ethan, we can totally support these products. We just can't make any money doing it. And I remember thinking, okay, all right, this is the magnitude of the challenge that I have, that if we are going to be able to help people support products in a real and meaningful way, then we are going to have to do a lot better than just a business case. So as a rule, I'm a really analytical guy, right? And the idea of modeling the true costs, the hidden costs of supporting old designs that have a lot of obsolescence, but that are generally old, really appealed to me. And over the years, we've done models, a lot of different models, anywhere from understanding the true cost of obsolete inventory to actually modeling the net profitability of a product, a specific product line. We even did an opportunity cost model for a European OEM whose engineering team was spending too much time sustaining old designs. So how much was that costing them? And what we found is that it's not that hard to model this stuff, right? And that most teams are spending about 25% of their time on 5% of their orders. And most of these orders are old products that have low and sporadic demand, okay? And it's these low and sporadic demand products that are the real killers, right? I traditionally see board OEMs sort of point to big orders for old designs as justification for holding on to their old products. Unfortunately, when you go and look at the volume over time, they don't add up. They're a shadow of their original self. I have also found that people generally stay inside their boxes, okay? So organizations typically kind of resist holistic solutions to big problems because it's too hard to kind of get the C-level buy-in needed in order to put into place changes across the entire organization. Last summer, I was working with a US aerospace company, and they were putting together a new design. I was working with a program manager. He's a pretty proactive guy. And he was putting together a design for a new avionics controller. And obsolescence was a big driver for it. And the problem with the avionics, and what he was looking to do was he was looking to engage us to do a design for sustainability, okay? Obsolescence was driving it. He had a lot of, what he wanted to do is he wanted to do something now to, in the future, avoid the problems that he was having. Unfortunately, what happened was he couldn't get buy-in from anybody to do a business case to invest a little bit more money to design for sustainability, okay? And what we found was that the problem was organizational, right? His boss, who was the VP of engineering, totally understood the value of designing for sustainability. But sustainment was supply chain's problem, and engineering was all about getting the product out on time. And then when he went over to the supply chain guys, he asked them, but they weren't interested in design for sustainability because design was his problem, right? Design wasn't his problem, that was engineering's problem. And in the end, this is crazy because this was in the face of an obsolescence event they were having right now at that moment. This was a different controller, and they had just scrapped about $1 million of obsolete component inventory out of their warehouse, and they had only just found out not too long after they scrapped it all that it was actually part of a big last-time buy of components that they needed to sustain that controller, this other controller, for out years, okay? And I mean, this sounds crazy, right? But it's not crazy. I mean, I see sane and smart people do this all the time. And it really comes from it's what happens when you don't treat old designs differently than new designs. And the reality is, this is kind of human nature, that people don't work on proactive things when they're really under the gun and fighting fires. And let's face it, a lot of us are pretty routinely fighting fires. And so if they did really understand around the idea of treating old designs differently than active and new designs, then they would have been able to align the entire business around the geriatric years of these old avionics controllers, right? And they wouldn't have thrown out that inventory. And then they would have probably taken advantage of the opportunity to design for sustainability. If the future is now, right, and we accept the idea that treating old designs differently than new designs is good, and that there are a lot of hidden costs if we don't do it like that, what does the future really look like? Okay. Well, I mentioned earlier that about 25% of a business overhead is spent supporting orders and products that are less than 5% of sales revenue. So what would it mean to your organizations if 25% of your overhead could be freed up and reallocated for business objectives, right? Real business objectives, right? more resources to business performance objectives means better business performance. And so what would it look like to your sales team if they were only focused on selling new products and servicing active products? What would it look like to the profitability of products if operations could really focus on active products and flow products, right? What would it look like for customer satisfaction and goodwill if your customer-facing folks and indeed your company was not tied up and tarnished by obsolescence issues? I mean, it's a pretty good future. And how would it even work? Well, by definition, it would have to be simple and it would have to be easy. It would be operationalized. There would be processes that would be agile. There would be decision-making criteria that everybody understood so that they trusted in the outcome. And then there would also be easy access to information that people could get so that they could make informed decisions. Now, this is a pretty cool future, right, that I paint. And in fact, it is the way that my company, GDCA, works internally and then with our customers and with our clients. And it's not that hard if you can make a thought shift. So I would say to anybody, bringing it on home, that anybody who wants to address and stop feeling the pain of obsolescence, right, as a night job, right, that's undermining their day job, I would really encourage them to find a smart person in their organization to talk to them about what they think the true costs of treating old designs like they're active are. If you have access to a VP of engineering, you might ask them what it would mean to them if they didn't have to spend so much time sustaining old designs. VP of Ops or a Chief Operating Officer, you might ask them if they think that there are some products that they're actually losing their shirt on. And I'll bet you the answer will be yes. If you get into an elevator, right, with a CEO, you might ask them, right, if what they think of the idea that there might be some hidden costs out there that are actually making some of the orders that we do not profitable. Okay, you never know, you might get a promotion out of it, right, hopefully, right? At the very least, it could be an interesting conversation starter. But I think that is the radical idea. Treat old designs differently than active designs. Thank you all for your time and attention, and I wish you all a very happy future. Thank you.